everybody for joining us. This is week 4 of our live stream series. I'm Evelyn Jerome Alexander. I'm the owner of Magellan College Counseling, and I'm based here in the Los Angeles area. And our 12 counselors work with students across the country to help make their college search and application process more organized and less stressful. And I'm here tonight, I'm thrilled actually to be here tonight with Lynn O'Shaughnessy, who is the author of The College Solution. This might be an older version, Lynn, I'm not sure.
That was the first edition. But
that was the first edition. I should have you sign it for me. Okay. Lynn is basically like the national expert on financial aid and how to find the right fit for your child at the price that fits your pocketbook. So she spent years as a financial journalist. And when her older child started to go through her college search, that's when she sort of dug in and started to educate herself on how this college application process really works, and how to get the deal that isn't going to break your pocketbook and break your retirement fund. So I'm going to have her give us a couple pointers, and then I'm going to jump in, Lynn, and ask you to clarify or give us a little bit more information. So if you could give us just a handful of sort of high-level pieces of information, what should parents really know as their child is in maybe 10th or 11th grade and just getting started on their college search process?
Well, I think, you know, the pandemic is going to change things, and I think colleges are going to be desperate, like some of them, to even stay alive. So they're going to have to give people more money. They're going to have to try to match what other competitors are giving. And I think that's something that is important to know. The first offer isn't going to be the last offer. I also think kids and parents have to get over this belief, of, you know, higher income parents, affluent parents and kids, that there's only, you know, maybe 24 schools in this country worth going to. That's just ridiculous. And that's also can be a financial disaster, because if you are high income and you're aiming for the most elite schools, you are going to pay over $70,000 a year for that. And who can afford that? And even more crazy to do that now with a pandemic going on. On the other hand, those schools, the most elite schools, give very good need-based aid, but they primarily educate extremely wealthy students.
So here's a sort of good question to start with. If you have a child who's already in college, you know, any year in college, and suddenly, because of where we are, you aren't making what you were making 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what should you do? How do you fix that?
Yeah, you should absolutely appeal whatever award they might have, or maybe they didn't have an award because they were paying the price, or they just had a merit award and now they, you know, have gotten cut back on their job or lost their job. Or so you can, you know, ask the school for more money. And what's interesting is, because of action by the U.S. Department of Justice last fall, schools are now able to compete in ways they didn't previously, including recruiting transfer students. So, you know, that's fair game to go after kids who are already out of school. And, you know, you might even consider, you know, looking at transferring if another school would give you more money, as long as your credits would transfer. But yeah, it used to be that you'd think, oh, you know, once a school's got you, you're stuck, right? If you don't get money. But I'd say there's less of that. It's a lower possibility now, just because of the pandemic and colleges really needing to hold on to their kids as well as attract enough freshmen.
So let me just explain something that Lynn sort of brushed on. So last fall, the National Association for College Admission Counseling, which is sort of the national group, it's voluntary, but most colleges are members, most counselors are members. They had been pursued by the Department of Justice for about 2 years for anti-trade violations. And that is to say, once you as a student have committed to a college, every other college had to back off. Every other college had to say, okay, she's yours. And the Department of Justice decided that that was anti-competitive. And they basically forced NACAC to rescind that gentleman's agreement, if you will, such that we all knew as that vote was being taken, and I was in the room when the vote was taken, that we were all aware that this year it was going to be kind of the Wild West anyway. And so, you know, May 1 is the traditional deposit deadline, but we all knew that a student who put a deposit down on May 1 could easily be pursued by another college with a better offer of more financial aid or some other incentive after May 1st, which before this year would have been completely unheard of.
Right. And who knew that this big change was going to come, and then a pandemic on top of it?
On top of it, exactly. And just from a financial perspective, you know, what was already going to be topsy-turvy is just a mess now. It's just a mess. So Lynn, can you explain, I just want to kind of go back to basics. Can you explain PPY? Can you explain EFC to people, again, may have a 9th or 10th grader, don't know what any of these things are and why they need to know them?
Right. Well, it's really important to learn what your expected family contribution is. You can do that now. Like if you have a freshman, you could be in middle school. Like it's something that's important to get a handle on. And basically what a EFC is it indicates what the formula says you should be able to pay for 1 year of college. And it's expressed as a dollar figure. If you have an adjusted gross income of under 26,000, your EFC is 0, like you can't afford anything. That doesn't mean that you're not going to pay something, but that says you can't afford anything. On the high end, very wealthy people, I mean, there's no cap on what their EFC would be. Okay. And it's important to know what that is. You can find it today if you want. You just use the EFC calculator on the College Board's website. Yep. And you'll need your non-retirement accounts, your income for the household, and you will get this dollar figure. So why is this important? For a variety of reasons. One, if you have a high EFC, you would, and money is an issue, and it usually is, you will want to look for schools that give good merit aid. Okay. Oh, there it is. It's the EFC calculator on the College Board.
Yep. Sometimes parents that I work with are shocked that the way that this process works, no one ever comes to you and says, how much do you think you can afford for college? It's a formula.
It's a formula. And people don't like the formula, but it is what it is. Now, the thing is, and I've told people this, you know, I was on a webinar earlier today with financial planners, and what I said was, you know, it doesn't really matter if you need need-based aid or you're not going to qualify for that, but and you're looking for merit aid. Really, what's important is just getting a cut in the price, right? Whether it's called need-based or merit scholarship, who cares? You just don't want to pay full price for school. But so if you have a high EFC, you're going to look for schools that give merit aid to higher income kids, of which the vast majority do, except the most elite schools. If you have a lower EFC, you know, you're going to look at schools that are more generous, and also your state schools and community colleges, right? That you want to have to pay as, you don't have much money and you want to pay as little as possible. The other reason that, so that's something that you should know well in advance. Like, okay, I'm shocked that our EFC say is maybe 40,000. Like, who said we could pay that? But at least you have an idea of what schools are going to look at this formula, right? And then you make decision, maybe also save more money if possible. The other thing that EFCs are really good for is at the very tail end of the process. You've applied to schools, you've gotten awards, and you'll get an award, and maybe let's say the school costs $70,000 and you got a $25,000 award. Is that good? Well, you won't really know unless you know what your EFC is. You know, so if you got a $25,000 award at a $70,000 school, but your EFC is $10,000, that's all you can pay. That's a terrible award, you know? Right. So and knowing your EFC at the tail end can help you negotiate by saying, hey, look, this is my EFC. Now, one of the problems is schools don't really want you to know what your EFC is. So for private schools, they have their own little EFC. If they're a profile school,
formula. Yeah.
You need to ask them, if it's not on the award letter, you need to ask them, hey, you know, John Hopkins or Stanford or whatever, what's my EFC, right? And then you can, you know, based on that, you can see if there's any, you know, you can negotiate for a better award.
Right. So that's an interesting point that you made. For people who are watching the playback later, I'll stick the link under, but I have a webinar that's already on our website that's about 45 minutes that's just about this topic, need-based and merit-based aid, and financial aid in general. But some people don't realize that the formula, so we talked about the FAFSA formula, right? There are actually multiple formulas, and different colleges use different formulas. So if you're applying to Indiana University or the University of Minnesota that are FAFSA schools, right? They only want that one document, and that's where they get your EFC from. Versus if you're applying to Michigan is a profile school, right?
Yes.
So if you're applying to the University of Michigan or many of the private schools, there's a couple hundred private schools that use additional information to create a different number. That's their assumption of what you would be able to pay.
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting, and you know, all the schools, there's about 200 that use the profile. Very few state schools do. Michigan
is rare. Yeah.
Yeah. Virginia, William and Mary, North Carolina. But one of the things that's interesting about these profile schools, which, you know, anybody who's going to be aiming for more selective private schools are probably going to have to fill out this profile. What, you know, we were talking, Evelyn, about, oh my gosh, people being surprised at their EFC. Well, one factor for the EFC for these profile schools is often your home equity. So if you're looking at your EFC and going, wow, I can't believe this, it could be the home equity. Now, schools, profile schools assess home equity in different ways. Some, the minority, don't include it at all, like Harvard doesn't, but some will link it to your income. So if you're like, you know, you have a lower salary, but you just happen to live in a house that's appreciated, then they're not going to penalize you as much. And then there's other schools, Boston College for one, that comes to mind. They don't care, man. They're going to like assess every last dime, which can totally blow you out of the water in terms of financial aid. So you need to know how schools assess home equity. And also you can always appeal it. Sometimes schools will say, well, we assess all of it, but you know, people can appeal, which is pretty disingenuous, because how many families would even know to appeal that, or that this was even a consideration?
So I have a client who just finished her freshman year at Smith, and the parents live in a home in Santa Monica. You know, the home is a lovely, modest home. It's a lovely home, but it happens to be in a neighborhood where, you know, if they sold the house just for the land, they would get millions of dollars. So that's not necessarily the value of their home, but it happens to be what their property is worth, and they're getting killed. Right. So it's really unfair. So what does all this lead up to? Because a lot of people think that financial aid is the part you think of at the very end of the process.
No, it's not. I mean, you have to, you know, one is, you know, getting your EFC, generating that, and then also understanding what kind of schools might give your child money and which won't, you know, like aim for the ones that are going to be generous. So you have to understand what type of schools those are based on your kid's academic statistics and your EFC.
So, and I asked that of you knowing that it was wrong, but I guess my point is, you know, most people go into their college search with a list of schools that they want to apply to, like, here's what we want. And sometimes they'll hand us their list and say, here's what we want. And, you know, this is literally the conversation that we start to have with them. There are some schools that do not give merit aid. It doesn't matter what your scores are. It doesn't matter if you're, Right. So I always tell people, if you want to avoid having a very uncomfortable conversation with your child, which is something like, sweetie, you did everything we told you to do and you did great and you got in, but we either can't afford it or don't want to afford it given what the other option is.
Right. Yeah. So that's super important. One way to avoid that nightmare, right? And you should never pick schools in a vacuum. If money is an issue, like that's insane. Okay.
Right.
So also it's insane, I think, to have the kid drive the process. Like, when parents go, oh, you've worked so hard, just apply wherever and we'll make it happen. Like, no, don't do that. So one thing that's critical is use net price calculators of every school a kid thinks they want to go to. Have that conversation before you ever apply. And if the net price calculator says, oh, you're going to pay full price, or oh, you're going to pay far more than a parents could possibly handle, then tell the kid, don't apply, sorry, or just say, look, you can apply, but if this net price calculator result is what you end up getting, you're not going, right? So you have that conversation before the child gets acceptances, because then it's harder. It becomes a lot more emotional when that happens. When you got kids crying and, I'd still say hold your ground and don't let them go. But why put a kid through that? Like, let them know many months in advance, not a year in advance or more, to use those net price calculators. And sadly, most families do not know about net price calculators.
So most people don't even know that phrase that you just said, and that's why I just pulled it up. And I feel like I'm remembering hearing you say something about, am I remembering that this one?
Carnegie Mellon used to have a horrible calculator, but I think they have switched over now.
It used to just ask you how old you were.
How old, and if you wanted to stay in the dorm or not. And that's another thing is, okay, it looks like they have a good one now. It's through the College Board. Yeah, I mean, I asked them once at a NACAC conference in front of all these people, and like, why do you have a lousy calculator, Carnegie Mellon? I don't get it. And people were like, oh, wow, she's asking the question. So that caused quite a stir. But anyway, so that's a good calculator. Now, most calculators at private schools, University of Pennsylvania did a study last year that looked at them and said about 25% of calculators at private schools are lousy and about 50% at state schools.
Are lousy. Oh, interesting.
The reason, so I should explain what these things are. Basically, you're going to use some of the same information you use to fill out an EC calculator, right? Like your income, assets, and marital status, size of the household, that sort of thing. And you put all that in. And if it's a school that provides merit scholarship money, if it's a good calculator, it will ask about your kids, say GPA or test scores, things like that.
Right.
Then the calculator goes, okay, based on all this information, does this child qualify for federal aid, state aid? And then do they qualify? Are we going to give this kid any institutional money?
Right.
And then they add all of that up and subtract it from the cost of attendance, and that is your net price.
So this is an interesting, I'm going to stop. So just the fact that I got that far into the net price calculator and it was asking me those detailed questions, that tells you that it's going to give you accurate information.
Oh yeah. If you want to show a bad one, because I think it's good to illustrate that, just because you'll see, oh God, this is a bad one. Call up NYU's. That's a bad one. And also NYU is kind of in some ways unique, because there's very few schools in this country that give really bad need-based aid and really bad merit scholarships.
Merit aid.
I mean, they are kind of in a class of their own. So this is a bad calculator.
How do we know that?
Well, I'll show you when they ask. Just keep, unless they've changed it, but okay, yeah, here you go. So let's just say you plan to, what your age is on campus. And then they ask if you're married. That's just if you're dependent. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
And then how many are in your family? What is your
No
annual
household income after? Okay, let's just say
That's one thing. That's a big giveaway. See that if you go back to that, it
Yeah.
only goes, it just says above 99,999. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of difference between that, right? It's just ridiculous. And just to have these ranges as opposed
Yeah.
to what is your income?
Yeah. I get it. Okay.
The other thing that it doesn't have is what your assets are.
Right. So how can it tell me?
So this is it. This is like, what? Like, how do they even determine? They just, based on like nothing, they
How do they know? Right. If I make $500,000, I'm not getting $26,000 in grant aid.
right. And you don't know how much you have in assets, right? Non-retirement
Right.
assets. So that's what I'm saying. People can clearly see, oh, this is a ridiculous.
This
Now,
is
if
a
we
bad
start over, let's pretend that we're not looking for need-based aid. We're just looking for merit aid. And they'll be.
Oh, okay. That didn't even occur to me to say that. Okay. All right. On campus.
And then that's it. 3 questions. So basically they're saying, oh, you'll probably pay full price.
Oh, wow.
So that
Wow.
is a worthless calculator. That is the federal calculator.
So the difference between a good net price calculator and a bad net price calculator is the good ones are going to give you lots of detail.
Yeah, they're going to ask a lot of questions. They're actually going to ask what your income is. They're actually going to ask, have you pulled things off of your income tax return? They're actually going to ask you what your assets are and your child's assets are.
And I should feel safe putting that data into, I didn't check, but is that a secure website? It never took my name.
Yeah, you don't have to put your name down at all.
Right. One of the things you said was about saving more money. So again, just to be clear, there's need-based aid and there's merit-based aid. They're different, they're separate, they're based on different things. Some colleges give both, but very few do a good job, as Lynn said, at both. Many colleges give merit aid. Like more colleges give merit aid than don't, right? And when we say merit aid, we mean based on grades and test scores, although test scores are falling a little bit out of fashion right now. So based on grades.
Or most schools, like most private schools, they give money to almost everyone.
Right.
You know, it doesn't really matter what your test scores or GPA is. I mean, if you get in, you're going to get something.
Right. You get money for being from California for some schools.
You get money for just being accepted.
Yeah, there's some schools where if you apply before December 1, you get X amount of money.
But really, most private schools have to work hard to get enough kids, and so you get in, you're guaranteed something.
But it kind of, doesn't it make you wonder? It really makes me wonder, why don't they all just lower the price?
Because unfortunately, parents and kids think that, oh, if it's a higher price, it must be a better school, so they can't do school.
So there is an unfortunate group, and Lynn, part of your class, and we'll talk about your class in a moment. You give people a list of schools that do not give merit aid.
Right.
And unfortunately, they are all names that you know. Usually the lists that, clients bring to us are full of those names.
Right.
And
that's not a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence, right? Because it's a name you know, and therefore it must be fabulous. Even though we always like to say Olive Garden, everybody knows Olive Garden. It doesn't mean they serve great food. So, the goal is for you to help your child build a list of colleges that are a good fit for them, academically, socially, emotionally, and a good fit for you financially. And this is where we always tell our clients, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money, but you could literally spend $75,000 a year for 4 years on college and get the fancy diploma with the fancy name, or you could make different choices and get a very similar education, sometimes even a more personalized and hands-on education.
Right, because a lot of the schools that kids have on their list are research universities, which aren't very friendly to undergrads anyway.
Right.
So people need to understand the difference between a college and a university. But the reason why that list, kids who come in and want certain schools, typically these are high income students, right? They want to go to the US News's top ranked schools, which mean nothing, by the way. But that's why those top ranked schools don't give merit scholarships, because they don't have to. As long as you have rich students coming to those schools and going, okay, I don't like it, but I'll pay $75,000 a year. These schools are off the hook. They're like, great, we're not giving merit aid. So you have schools like Tufts, for instance, now, if you look at the federal statistics, I think it's over 60, maybe 64% of students at that school pay full price.
64% paid full price.
Full price.
That's a lot of money.
36% get something, but you know, and at a school like that, it says it meets 100% in need, you can be quite well off and get some financial aid. So you can imagine how wealthy the vast majority of that school is, but they can get away with that. I mean, that's just how it is at a lot of schools. A lot of those schools, half of the kids are extremely, extremely wealthy.
Extremely. I had a client a couple of years ago, and one of her, you know, we always tell people, searching for college is like creating a Venn diagram. You have to decide what your circles are and what's important to you, and then you layer them on top of each other, and we see what, you know, shines through in the middle. So I had this client a couple of years ago, and one of her circles, one of her things that was important to her was she wanted to go to a school where there were as many kids in the bottom 10% of income as in the top 1%. And that's very hard to find.
Yeah, that's hard to find. Yeah, that is rough.
But you know, she actually ended up at a CTCL school, Colleges That Change Lives.
Where'd she end up?
She's at Kalamazoo.
Oh, okay.
And there's a good number of very well-to-do kids at Kalamazoo, but Kalamazoo does a really good job of reaching out and, you know, diversifying their student body.
Well, and they also have somebody there in Kalamazoo who extremely wealthy person who promised Kalamazoo kids, you know, if you went through all the way to high school, you would pay for college. So they probably got some of those kids.
Yeah. Yep. No, and a lot of schools, a lot of wealthier schools have that. I went to Johns Hopkins. Hopkins has the Baltimore Promise or Baltimore Scholars. So, I mean, I feel like colleges are doing a really good job of working to get more kids who are under-resourced in, you know, through their doors and graduated. But the problem is, if you're middle class, if you are not that, you know, uber wealthy, $75,000 times 4, not a big problem. If you're in that middle zone, you're looking at some possibly difficult choices if you have those top names stuck in your head. If you wipe that away and stop focusing on that, you're golden.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think poor students have the worst problems because they don't get enough support. And yeah, there are a few schools, you know, the most elite schools will take, you know, a token number of low income kids, but most of the kids are going to be quite wealthy. If you're middle class, if you get into those kind of schools, which it's hard for them to get into, they're going to be fine. So, you know, I think middle income kids and low income kids can have it tough.
Right.
But I do think, you know, frankly, I think the most important thing is the money. And a kid can come in and want all different kinds of things, but really, you just have to be able to afford it. And otherwise, you're going to condemn them and their parents to a lot of debt that they may never get out of. And it's even scarier now. So I don't think people have that, you know, the luxury just to try to aim for whatever they want. I mean, really, to me, can you afford it? Because there's been studies that show, you know, there was I wrote about it years ago. There was Gallup and Purdue did a exhaustive research on what factors really matter for kids who got bachelor's degrees. You know, like what was it, a particular kind of school that made them happier in their lives and their jobs? So they did a lot of research. They came up with 6 factors that they thought really mattered. And while they were doing this, they were wondering, is there some kind of school that's, you know, magical that makes kids happier when they graduate? You know, so they looked at flagship state universities, highly selective research, private ones, liberal arts colleges, historically Black colleges, all sorts of them. And what they just ended up thinking it was 6 factors, which is, some of them were, you know, did you have a mentor? Did you have a teacher who made you, you know, interested in learning? Were you really active in the school? Did you do an internship or project that, you know, dovetailed with what your interest was in college? And when all those questions, only 3% of the 30,000 who were surveyed could say yes to all of them. You know, my daughter would have been one of them. You know, when she graduated from little school in the middle of nowhere, junior out of college, the president of the college said, you know, Lynn, your daughter squeeze the absolute most out of her liberal arts education, because that girl was involved, hustling, internships, super involved, study abroad, had mentors. I mean, she did the whole thing, and she's done.
Made it happen.
She has done exceedingly well in her life. She's now got a, startup in the Silicon Valley, and
Wow.
all these people working for her. She's just 30 years old. She's doing great.
And this is the thing, people have it in their head that you can only be successful. You can only have a startup in the Silicon Valley if you attend a blue chip school. Yeah. And that's the thing. We have to just erase that expectation. Lynn approaches it from a financial perspective, which I think is hugely important to so many people who work with us. But to me, the other really important perspective is if you come in with a list of names that and you tell your child, these are the schools we are going to apply to, without letting I know you don't want the student to drive the train completely, but the student really has to feel some ownership of where we're going and where we're applying and what this whole thing is about. You start with that list of names just look at the numbers. The student, these are the schools that reject many, many, many more students than they admit. You are much more likely to get bad news, which means your 17, 18-year-old will end up feeling like they have disappointed you, which
right.
to
or that
me
they don't love them, or that their parents don't love them because it's almost like tied to these stupid brand names, right? It's very destructive. I think that's why there's so many kids who have mental health issues in college now, because they were stressed in high school because they felt like, oh my God, if I don't get an A on AP Physics, my mom's going to
be disappointed.
I'm not going to get into John Hopkins or MIT or what. I mean, oh my God, talk about pressure. Geez.
Right.
It just robs kids of their high school years. And this really is just a phenomenon of high income kids. Like, most kids, they're not aiming it for these schools, which is healthier in some ways. So it's just really very destructive.
Yeah. So for so many reasons, I think all of us agree. And it's funny because people will have like an initial consultation with us, and we don't like shoot down their dreams in the first meeting, but we'll say, that's great that you want UCLA. That's great that you want Harvard. Let's talk about like all the other choices that are out there. And frequently the parent will call me and say, we really want someone who's going to get us into a top tier school. That's what they say. I know. I love that you're laughing. And honestly, we say, that's not what we do. We're not here to get you in. We're here to help guide your child to find the right place where they will turn into the human being that they are going to be. And, most people watching this have probably not heard of Juniata College. She's not kidding. It is in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. It's a college.
My son was a little not so isolated. He went to Beloit College in Wisconsin. So that was a lot easier to get to because you can just fly to Chicago, hop on this bus that comes 12 times a day and get to Beloit. So that's another thing you can look. Some schools, they seem like isolated, but it just depends on where you're flying to or where you're driving to. It's not bad at all.
A lot of parents come to us with the one flight rule. I can't switch planes in Chicago. I can't switch planes in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I mean, that's something to think about. Can you go direct wherever you are?
You know what I say, that's one of the later things to think about, how to get there. I get that logistically it's important, and of course we want you to visit, and of course that this year that got blown out of the water. But to us, it's really about finding the right fit. And I love that your kids both ended up at colleges that changed lives. Mm-hmm. And schools where they were given that mentorship, that connection, because you're right. At UCLA,
I think you also have to think about the kid. It's like my daughter, who's like a dynamo, extrovert, emotionally intelligent, like she could have survived at a UC, for instance, which can be very impersonal and hard to have any contact with professors. Now, but she could have thrived there, but she thrived even more at this college where everybody knew her and she could do all sorts of things, right? Yeah. Like she wanted to start her own business there. They're like, sure, so I mean, they supported her. She wanted to make picture frames. Her art teacher said, hey, I'll create a one credit course. You come in, you can use all the saws and I'll be there, to make your picture frames. That's not going to happen at Berkeley. Now, my son, on the other hand, he is much quieter. You know, he's more of an introvert. Like he needed that connection.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
also, I think he would have died at a UC. And
Right.
also, I think, and this is something I don't think people think about is, I mean, he was a math major, which is a freaking hard major, right? I don't think he could have survived that at a big research university, but at a college where it's a small department, the professors know you, you have 10 kids in a class, no more than 20. He had, you know, even independent study with his the math chairman. Like he was telling me once he was walking out of a class and the professor just said, "Hey, Ben, you seemed a little, did you get the concept, you know?" And Ben goes, "No, I was having a hard time." Because, "Well, come to my office. Let's talk about it." Like, that's the kind of thing you get at a small school that could get you through some of these tough majors. And also you have more opportunity to have a better grade because there's a small classes, you can have more quizzes and participation points and projects and things like that that can help you do well, as opposed to sometimes going to a research university where there's weed out classes. Like, let's weed these kids out, right? We don't want all these kids to become math majors. We don't have the, you know, we don't want to deal with them. So that's another thing that you need to think about at a research university. You might have a midterm and a final, and that's it.
That's it. And also think about if you're looking at a graduate program, you need recommendations, just like you need recommendations in high school. And these professors at the little schools, they know you so much better. The recommendation letters are so much stronger.
They know professors at all these schools, you know, and in fact, Ben had 2 mentors that helped him when he was going to graduate school. His roommate, who was from San Francisco, was a physics major, and he wanted to go into engineering. And so his physics professor was talking to him about what are the best graduate programs for what he wanted, which was UT Austin and UC Davis. And, you know, they helped him identify those schools. UT Austin really wanted him and flew him down and was, you know, courting him. He ultimately decided Davis was the best one. But that's the kind of stuff that you can do when you have professors who know you. In fact, I talk to kids sometimes who go to these big research universities. And one time I talked with a friend of mine's kid who was an econ major at UCLA. And he said he and his friends were, you know, they wanted to ultimately have a recommendation. So their goal was, while they're at UCLA, to know a professor well enough to be able to get a recommendation. Like, that was the goal. Can we get one professor who knows us?
Wow.
You know, I have a good friend who's a tenured professor at UC San Diego who in STEM. And he tells me that, oh, I have kids, you know, come up to me all the time and just say, "Hey, can you give me a recommendation for medical school or grad school?" And he's like, "I don't know who you are. You know, there were 200 kids in my class, you know, I can just tell them what your grade was." And sometimes they'll persist, he says, and ask them, "Well, could I take you out to coffee and you get to know me?" And he's like, "No." No, I have no desire to do that. Like,
wow. And the people who teach at little liberal arts colleges, they're there because they love young adults, and they're there because they want to teach and mentor.
It's not for everybody, but I think people really need, and that's where you come in, is understand what the difference is between a college and a research university and a master's level university. Yeah, they're very different animals. And if you just are focused on certain names at the start, you're going to miss opportunities, like you said.
Right. I always tell people it's literally like going to the supermarket. If you go to the supermarket without a list, you're going to come, maybe it's just me, you're going to come home with Ben and Jerry's and Oreos. But if you go to the supermarket and you know what you're looking for, which means you need to do, and I mean the student, not the parent, the student really has to think about, what am I looking for this 4-year experience? That's the way to really start building a list. And to that end, I will do this again next week with Ann Wager, who is the founder of Corsava Cards, which helps us help students prioritize what they're looking for in their college experience. And Chuck Lydiard, who is with the University of Delaware, and we're going to talk about how to build a college list. Let me just throw one more question at you, Lynn, on the money side. So many families come to us and say, is it a good idea for me to save money? Aren't we getting penalized for saving money?
So I'm glad you brought that up because that drives me crazy. So it's so good to save as much as you can. Save, 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 save. One, because, you know, financial aid often isn't that great anyway.
Right.
And for every $10,000 you save, let's say you're aiming for a private school, right? You save 10,000, the most that will get dinged from you in terms of getting less money, it would be $500.
$500
based on your EFC, you know, when they run the EFC. Parent assets are assessed at a very, very, very low rate, only 5% on a profile school. So 5.64 for a FAFSA school. And especially with the profile schools, they allow you, they automatically, I mean, it's a proprietary formula, but they allow you to shelter some of your non-retirement money. And retirement money doesn't count. So yeah, you are going to be, you'll have many, many more options if you save and save as much as you can. The other thing is, not only is your non-retirement money assessed at a low rate, but the biggest factor, a big factor is your income. That's much more important than your assets. So yeah, it's crazy to think that, oh, if we save, then we won't play. Just get that out of your head.
Get that out of your head.
Get that out of your head.
Write a book. We should write a book about, we should call it Things That You Think That Are Wrong.
Yeah, lots when it comes to college.
A 1,000-page book. So save. The answer is save. And to me, the answer is, honestly, stop. Like, I'm sure people ask you this. People come to us and they basically say, can you help me hide my assets? Insane. The answer is stop need-based, merit-based. Stop focusing on the need-based. You don't need. Focus on this.
Right. It doesn't matter what kind you get. You just want the money. And if you try to hide your assets, you'll have people who will say, oh, I'll help you. But you'll get into these super expensive annuities or life insurance, and it's not going to help you anyway. So you're going to be much worse off for trying this stunt. And it's not going to work.
So
So the other thing is, profile schools want to know about money in non-retirement annuities. And plenty of them want to know about life insurance, cash value. So, you know, you're not going to be fooling anybody.
You can't hide it. You can't hide it.
No.
So go where the money is. Go where the money is. Go to the schools that give money to people like you. That's really the answer. That's my very, very boiled down answer.
Right.
So Lynn has this fabulous program that is online for parents. I went through one that you did many, many years ago for counselors. But this is her website, thecollegesolution.com. I highly, highly recommend if you want. How many sessions is it for the parent?
Oh, well, you know, it's a lifetime. You can just stay in it as long as you want. But I mean, you can, click on that and you can see, I have a little video myself and all that. But yeah, it's, there's 8 modules, videos, resource guides, lessons. And then I'm adding, I just sent it earlier this week to my web guy. I'm adding a module on the pandemic. And then I have occasional webinars where people can ask me questions. So, so there's a lot. So they're 27, but there'll be more with the pandemic.
There's a lot of stuff in here. I think for what you charge, the information that for parents who are truly looking for return on investment, college that's affordable for your family, this is a great way to
it's really just kind of, if you want to like cut to the chase and understand how schools price themselves, what the schools would give you money, how to evaluate individual schools. I show you that with free tools on, this school typically gives X merit aid, and what percentage in need does this school meet? Like, I teach you a lot of different things in the class to just kind of, there's so much information out there that can be overwhelming. I just kind of cut to the chase and give you a blueprint of, okay, this is what you really need to know. To make the best decisions and not pay a fortune for college.
Exorbitant money. I guess the way I would characterize what you do is you empower people to sort of take control of the financial aspect of going through your college search. What we do is something totally different.
Right.
We're handholders. We walk them through.
Right. Right. I don't do that, but
we all have the same goal, but
right.
we do it differently.
And I've had so many people over the years, you know, reach out to me and say thank you, and have saved, you know, many, many tens of thousands of dollars, or $100,000 or $200,000 because of what they learned in my class.
Yep. Yep. So that's fabulous. So, so highly recommend. Of course, you can go to our website, magellancounseling.com. We have tons and tons of information on our blog, tons and tons, like hundreds of college write-ups and pictures from when we were allowed to visit colleges, photo galleries. So of course we invite you to that. I invite you to join me again next Thursday. Hopefully we'll make it work on Facebook. But if we have to come to YouTube, at least we have that. And again, next week, I'm going to be interviewing Ann Wager from Corsava and Chuck Lydiard from the University of Delaware. We're going to talk about building an awesome college list. And in 2 weeks, we're going to talk with Dr. Karen Coven, the founder of Language Bird, about extracurriculars and special talents on your college applications. So I hope you will join us for all of those. And we are going to say goodnight.
Thanks.